Warren Buffett said it best: risk comes from not knowing what you're doing. On today's episode, how to combine project risk tools with emergency planning, we're focusing on how project managers and public safety leaders can speak the same language when it comes to risk. The Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA, created the Threat and Hazard Indication and Risk Assessment, also known as THIRA, to help communities participate and plan for the unknown. In the same way, project risk registers help uncover obstacles before they become blockers. So today we'll connect the dots between THIRA, stakeholder maps, and integrated risk matrices so your team can prepare, prioritize, and progress no matter the scenario. But first, please silence your cell phones, hold all sidebar conversations to a minimum, and let's get started with the People, Process, Progress podcast in 3, 2, 1. Welcome back to the People, Process, Progress podcast, episode 4 of our All Hazards Project Management series, How to Combine Project Risk Tools and Emergency Planning. I'm your host, Kevin Pinnell. I used to live in the military medicine world, then public safety and all hazards emergency management, incident management. And then for a while now, I've worked in the project portfolio space in healthcare and IT, and I realize there's a lot of crossover. So if you've listened to the shows, thanks so much. If you haven't, subscribe, go to Apple, Spotify, all the places. PeopleProcessProgress.com is our hub where you can get to me on YouTube or Instagram or X, all those places, and I'll go over that again later. But thank you. So today, this risk, right? There's always risk before we do anything, whether it's spontaneous or planned. But I'll say that joint risk workshops can help create a shared understanding of uncertainty and build trust across teams. And sometimes it's a little scary. Joint, we're going to get together, we're going to throw it all on the table. But this is the people part, right? When we integrate traditional project risk registers, which I'll get into in a little bit, with hazard-based risk assessment tools, we could create a more complete risk picture. So if you're in the emergency management world or public safety world and you have a project, consider this. Or if you're in the project management world, listen to this and think how you can learn a bit from your public safety folks. This should be part of our process, right? With a more clear, visual, collaborative risk planning, we will drive better and faster decisions. And you guessed it, we will make progress together. So the first thing I want to talk about that's people and a tool here is those joint risk workshops, right? So we're going to make a stakeholder register. And this is a document that identifies stakeholders, their roles, interests, influence, communication needs. I talked about the RACI matrix. This is a little different, but very similar. And the RACI is, again, responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed. It says kind of how do we treat the folks involved? What should we do? Who owns things? That kind of stuff. So here's a project example that works, right? During multi-hospital, let's say, electronic health implementation, leaders using a stakeholder register align who do we need to influence, right? What are the roles? Who do we need to communicate with? Particularly, let's look at nursing and information technology, administrative and clinical leadership. It helps surface any early resistance and define who we need to target the risks and obviously the benefits that we want to get out of that project. Our cap toward our public safety and in this example, public health friends about regional mass vaccination. We saw this during COVID. I used to practice with this with my public safety and public health and county leader and state folks all the time. Our mission statement locally was to get a 10-day supply of antibiotics to over 300,000 people in 48 hours. No small task, right? So let's say in a regional mass vaccination campaign, there's emergency managers, public health folks using a stakeholder register and looking at who are our constituents, who are the folks that live in this area, can help us coordinate logistics better with the school systems, the National Guard, and IT. Now, a lot of this is baked into the processes we use, respectively, the planning P, public safety or all hazards process, and then our waterfall agile world of project management. So let's get into a couple strategies that can kind of combine these, right? So the first for people is cross-functional workshops, or risk workshops to be specific. And so for the EHR project example, let's keep rolling with that, right? We bring together folks from clinical and IT and operations. We identify potential go-live risks. We don't know what's happening in their area on the nursing units, and they don't know what's happening in plant operations, the facilities, or in IT. So we need to share that perspective, that common operating picture on, hey, if we have a downtime at this time, is that good or bad? Well, it's change of shift, so it's horrible, or it's good because we're not actively charting, or typically we chart, around this time each time. So again, we can also, as IT, flag integration delays. We're short on resources here or there. So we have these early. A lot of this is, again, part of a regular process, but think about just combining it into one workshop. It's hard virtually now. Of course, hospital workers are not virtual, but they really help mitigate a lot of risks that we could have well before launch or build. In the mass vaccination campaign example, these cross-agency workshops, right? These risk management, these risk workshops, again, are going to help us know, hey, law enforcement, what's going on out in the world? National Guard, what resources do you have? Public health, how should we do this, right? This is a public health-led thing. And, the school Wi-Fi might not be strong. Just these little things, these are risks, the infrastructure, where are we going to be, right? And it's fixable, but we can discover it early. So it's very helpful. So strategy 1 for the people is get everybody together and have a cross-functional risk workshop. Strategy 2, assign those roles, right? So don't just say, hey, here's a risk. Somebody's got to own those. We do that in project management. We kind of do it in all hazard incident management, where safety is going to make a safety plan and operations is aware of it. But that could be spelled out. That's where I think the public safety folks and the all hazard incident management, brothers and sisters, could take some from project management. Is when we make a risk register, we call out, here's the risk, here's the likelihood, here's where it goes. And there's equivalents for those. But let's go back to our example. So we're rolling out this electronic health records. We're going to give ownership to the nurse managers, right, for critical workflow risks. What could happen? What does happen in this workflow? While we as information technology take charge of system stability, right? And it helps for escalation. What if something happens? So when we plan for go live, we say, here's the folks that are going to be on. We make a whole workflow. If this happens, here's the sequence. It can also go to somebody at the service desk who's never been a part of it. And it reduces downtime and confusion. And for the vaccination, right, we know who's going to do, we build this into our incident action plans and planning, right? So who's going to do logistics, what in operations are we going to call the public health teams that are, communicating on what's happening, where are the supplies, what's going on with them. But we have identified these risks in this workshop, and then we've also outlined them in our plan. So we kind of get to dual hat those. So again, we're getting our people together. We're having functional workshops to identify risk. We're going to assign who needs to work on those risks, what we're going to do with them. So we're building this process, right? And we're aligning risk registers with hazard assessments. And so there's a tool we can use for that called an integrated risk matrix. It can be very simple. It can be, what's the risk? What's the impact if it happens? What's the likelihood that it happens? Who owns it? What are we going to do about it? It can be that simple. There are forms and stuff all for that. So let's talk about for a project example. So for the EHR implementation, we're going to do just that, right? We're going to flag what's high likelihood, high impact for different areas. Is it data? Is it the users? We're going to track that. So it kind of bleeds into our progress, but process and progress go hand in hand often. And then we're going to link to corrective action. So we know what to do. We're going to talk about it. We're going to pivot. We're going to stop doing things, start doing things. In public safety, same thing, right? We plan a great layout of where we're going to have this mass vaccination, and then this area doesn't work. We find out when we're on site again, and we should do a site visit ahead of time anyway, but we should know ahead of time with this risk matrix likely what's going to happen. Now, are there unknowns? Yes, for sure, right? And if there's these red zone risks, they're going to be addressed immediately, securing generators or security for the people there. Whole bunch of different risks that have to do with either the people, their environment, or sickness if you're doing this in an outbreak, all this kind of thing. So a strategy here to help this process is to align the risk register that we made with a hazard vulnerability assessment, right? So in the EHR process, we're going to look at what our hospitals' maybe hazard vulnerability assessment is. So are there any big environmental things that could impact us, right? We lose power all the time. We lose heat or something that could affect, if we affect the people, we're going to affect the project we're trying to put out there, particularly an electronic health record that tons of people use. And environmental stuff is a huge risk that we often don't think about, probably in the traditional project management world, because usually inside, unless you're doing construction or landscape or something like that. But it's important to consider, and environmental is also the politics of it, not just is it hot or cold and those kind of things. So consider that, consider aligning those. And it's a good thing for project managers and really leaders at any level to know what the hazard vulnerability assessment of your hospital is. So you just have an idea of what are the hazards where I am. For the vaccination thing, this is where our epidemiologists, our public health physicians are going to know, where's the disease in the area? What's the weather like? They won't be the weather folks, but we'll work with other folks, right? What are overlapping threats? We would make as part of our plan, what's the weather forecast for today, particularly when I was an EMS captain, as a planning captain. So for weather events, we would put the forecasts on there, the weather map. So everybody knew for the next 5 or 10 days, not just what are the units on the street, but what do we expect? Who do you call if you need help, if you need food and water, all that kind of stuff. Another strategy is to score internal and external threats together, right? Have one big list. Because if you have separate lists, it's hard to keep them combined. They can be updated differently. And again, you're going to do the same thing. What are the threats? What's the likelihood? What's the impact? Who owns it, if anything? You're not going to stop a tornado, but we could own that I'm going to help evacuate people to the basement. those kind of things, right? So this is part of good, particularly for an electronic health record or any other software or technical rollout, is what's your go live plan? What's your support plan? Who's going to do what? That leads into this if you've identified the risks, right? And similar for mass vaccination, what have you scored as far as, or rather, what's the score of the risk if you're short on staffing? Sometimes we're like, the plan looks awesome, we're full of staff, and then 5 people call out because life happens. So we got to be ready for those kind of things. So for the process, we want to align the risk register with the hazard vulnerability assessment, whether you're doing an electronic health record project or a mass vaccination or whatever it is. So you know, what are the threats to this place where we're going to have this big thing happen, this project or this vaccination? And the second thing is we're going to put the internal and external threats together, not on separate lists, because that's a nightmare. So incident command system folks, public safety folks, particularly emergency management, are very familiar with the hazard identification and risk assessment, or THIRA tool. It's out there, Google it. There's tons of templates. There's official ones, unofficial ones, but it really is a pretty straightforward thing. I've seen it mostly in spreadsheets. It's very easy to use, but it gives you some structure and it helps you refine that process. And again, unless you're doing this for a grant or reporting that requires you to have a certain way, find one that works for you and just start using it. So we're looking at people, right? We're doing these cross-functional workshops. We're looking at process. We're combining all the lists together. And of course, we're going to see how we're making progress. Well, through that matrix, we're going to get some visualization, and then we're going to communicate these risks, right? So that the HIRA tool, or again, hazard identification and risk assessment tool, it evaluates this across the probability and consequence, and it's very heavy used by emergency managers or hospital-specific emergency planners. But it's a really good structure, and it's actually one that project management could adopt to use for projects. So if you're a project manager, give HIRA, or hazard identification and risk assessment, a Google. So let's see how we're going to visualize this and communicate this. Okay, so we're going to heat maps. That's where we're going to. And that's kind of what it sounds like if you've seen a movie or the Predator heat vision, right? Where you see green or blue is cooler, and then it goes to red and then white hot. That's what we're looking at. And what it goes to is low risk to high risk. That's the simple explanation. The kind of more official is a color-coded chart showing risk severity based on likelihood and impact, right? So for a project, we're going to use this, or you can, and there's tools. There's, again, Smartsheet I love. I have no affiliation. You can make this with conditional formatting in Excel. There's online tools, all this kind of stuff. But basically, we want to look at this heat map. It's based on all the stuff we talked about this in an episode before, our combined workshop, our combined risk register, all these kind of things, or matrix. And it's going to show us where the risks lie and how do we address them. And we're going to update these, right? So it's not a fire and forget it. It's here's what we think ahead of time. Here's what's happening now. We're always changing the risk, the impact, the likelihood, if it's happening, obviously those kind of things. So this heat map has to change based on data that we feed it, unless we have some sort of machines or vehicles or something, some kind of GS device that we're tracking that is feeding back where things are. And then it's cross-referencing maybe what the weather is there, those kind of things, right? So for electronic health record, we're going to use as live of a heat map as we can to update leadership weekly, right? Like here's the risks. Heat map is kind of akin to a stoplight. It's a different visual. If you've seen weather maps, you've seen a heat map, right? So again, green is good, red or white hot is a problem, typically red. And we're going to just let leadership know at a high level, here's what's going on. Here's the good, the bad, the ugly of it. Similar for the vaccine campaign. Are we running low on supplies? No, we're doing good. We're getting this many a day. And the heat map could be, numbers. So are we high, medium, low, and people showing up or not to get these vaccinations or get this medication? So here's a couple strategies. One, build dashboards and use GIS data. I've been a part of some events and incidents and been very fortunate to work with GIS pros and have some good friends that work in the big GIS companies. And it's awesome. So you can get devices and have them attached to people, and they go all over the place, and you can see where they are and you can see the risks in the area. It's a little harder to do that and ask our project managers to where they're sitting in their house, right? But you can make heat maps using tools like Microsoft Power BI. There are other tools as well. That's what I'm familiar with. So you can see both, is it resources we're looking at, where there's too many, where there's not enough or just right? And are there similar deadlines that are being missed? So the key is building the system, how you want to use it. So the data in is good, and then the heat map for you is effective, because you can just throw data in there and it's not helpful. But what do you want to measure? Do we want to measure if our resources are being overtaxed or not, or underutilized, or if we're spending too much money or not enough? Or I don't know if you can not spend enough money in business, but that kind of thing, right? So strategy one for monitoring progress is build a dashboard with something. GIS is great, doesn't have to be, but build it so people can see it and get to it and they know where to find it. The second strategy for this progress part is we got to update those visuals. I mentioned this before. It's got to be something consistently like, I don't know, in an event that you're working, it's real time, right? You want devices that are just sending this back to you. In a project that's over months or years, weekly, every couple of days, every couple of weeks. It depends on the size of the risk and what's happening, but it should be a regular tempo so that anytime I can look and see what, is close to near real time. Like when we say real time, it's really hard to get that unless it's fully automated. That's just it. A person's not going to sit there and hit a button constantly. It's just not practical, especially if you're out there working with nurses on the unit or you're out there helping people fill out their paperwork before they get vaccinated. It doesn't make sense. It's got to be something automated. So to track progress, build a dashboard, find a way to automate the data, or if the frequency allows for a more planned event for a longer project, just set the frequency that, hey, every week we're going to update our risk register that's going to feed into the heat map. That means we're going to report that every 2 weeks to leaders, et cetera, et cetera. You got to find your tempo. So what I would say to you all is pick something, a current project or an upcoming planned event that you're going to have public safety folks at. Build a shared risk log, get together in a room and just throw it out there. What are the risks, right? It's very much like what comes out of the tactics meeting, but it's the safety plan. But it doesn't have to be super incident command system. It can be very basic, right? The risk is people don't show up, and what are we going to do about that? Or the risk is we run out of water bottles, or the risk is that the data doesn't, whatever it is, whatever people can think of, and then group them together. There's kind of things you can do, but keep it simple, right? This works in project management, it works in IT stuff, it works with operations and incident command system, public safety, and then prioritize the top ones, right? What do we have to address? Because either life safety, patient safety, that's always first, right? What's going to hit us in the wallet? What's going to hit us on the clock? What's going to reduce our quality? What's going to make our scope unmanageable for projects? Or what's unreasonable to ask somebody to do in a 12-hour shift? Like all these kinds of things. And then just start talking, right? Score them and start preparing. It doesn't have to be perfect at first. It should get pretty good before you go live or before the event starts. But something is better than nothing for sure. And that's coming from a public safety planner and project manager who you'd think would be just OCD about perfect plan and all that. And it's a lesson I learned a long time ago. Thankful to my mentors and friends. So what did we learn? What did we talk about? The people component of what we talked about when we are wanting to combine project risk tools with emergency planning, because I really think there's some good crossover, particularly with mindsets and some of the tools and stuff I talked about, is that we want to have stakeholder maps and cross-functional workshops. So get everybody together so we can find those blind spots, because you might see something I didn't see and vice versa. Process-wise, we're going to align what we call out, right, with hazard assessments that have already been done or done recently. We can get a more complete picture. And progress-wise, we're going to build tools. We want dashboards, we want matrices, we want updates from the field or from the data or the devices. And we're going to move teams to react to those, to address them. We're not just going to look at them and go, oh, cool, that's happening, right? Because when we combine this stuff with the precision of project planning and the urgency of public safety, we don't have to manage the risk. We just get to lead through it. Right? So thank you so much for listening to People Process Progress, particularly this episode. If it helped you connect the dots a bit between your project work and real-world risk management, please share it. Share it with a colleague. It's fun for me. I hope it's fun for you. Judging from some feedback I've gotten lately, it is. But especially maybe somebody in healthcare emergency services, RT leadership, let's keep building smarter, stronger systems together. If you want to stay together with me, share this episode, share the show. I'm on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, all the platforms these days. I'm on Instagram and X at PenelKG. I have a YouTube channel I just rebranded. It's called Own, Move, Anchor, which is own your mind, move your body, anchor your spirit. It's all those 7 pillars I've talked about of ownership, mindfulness, movement, boundaries, connection, sleep, and faith. Used to be called the Penel 5 Fitness Club. It's a little more holistic now. Still some workout videos, cold plunges, jiu-jitsu after action reports, ways to anchor your mind. Another great way to anchor your mind is through reading. I happen to have written a book called The Stability Equation, 7 Pillars for a More Balanced Life. That's where those pillars I just mentioned came from. And they came from me, from doing research, from being in a tough spot, finding my way out of it, planning my way out of it, and then taking action. And that's where ultimately this year, the thought of own your mind, move your body, anchor your spirit came from, because it combines all these pillars together. So remember though, when you're planning an event, whether you wear a badge or not, or you're in khakis, put people first, create a combined process, and make progress together. Thank you for being here, and Godspeed, y'all.